You feel it, don't you? That sensation that it's never enough. More money, more security, more accumulation, and worse, that emptiness that persists even when you achieve what you planned. Today, I'll reveal the psychological mechanism that keeps you in this infinite race and the story of a man who had everything in the palm of his hand and discovered he needed nothing. Goku was the heir to one of the greatest fortunes in feudal Japan. At 20 years old, he could have everything: power, respect, absolute security. He refused, and in that act of refusal, he found something that no amount of money could ever buy: true freedom. Chapter 1: The Son of Gold. Goku never knew poverty. From the first day of his life, everything was at his disposal. His father, one of the greatest feudal lords in Japan, accumulated wealth for decades: land, gold, political power. Everything would pass to Goku when he reached adulthood. It was destiny written in stone. No one questioned it, not even Goku. At 20 years old, his father gathered the entire court to make the official announcement. Goku would be the new lord. The transfer of power would happen in a grand ceremony, but that night before the ceremony, something happened that would change everything forever. Goku couldn't sleep. He wandered through the palace corridors, passing through chambers filled with gold, art, riches that most people would never see. And the more he walked, the more he felt something strange: a void and restlessness. That wealth, which should have meant completeness, only made him emptier. He left the palace and walked to the river that ran beside his family's lands. It was midnight. The moon illuminated the water, and it was there, in that darkness, that Goku found a fisherman, an old man, simple, who had spent his entire life fishing in that river. His clothes were rags. His boat was made of old, fragile wood. He had absolutely nothing of material value. But there was something in that man's face that Goku had never seen in any of the nobles in the palace: peace, lightness, a complete absence of that tension Goku had carried in his shoulders since birth. "You can't sleep either?" asked the fisherman, without turning to look at Goku. "I can't sleep," replied Goku. The fisherman smiled. "When you have everything, it's very difficult to sleep. There's always something to protect, something to fear losing. But when you have nothing..." The old man cast his fishing net and waited. When you have nothing, sleep comes as a natural gift. The body knows there's nothing to defend. Those words echoed in Goku in a way that no amount of formal education could achieve. He spent the entire night talking with the fisherman. The man didn't know who Goku was. To him, he was just a confused young man who had appeared on the river's edge in the middle of the night. The fisherman told him about his life, about how he woke when his body wanted to wake, about how he ate when he was hungry, about how his work wasn't obsession, but simply the natural expression of who he was. He fished because he was a fisherman, not because he needed to accumulate a specific amount of fish to guarantee his social status. "The greatest wealth," said the fisherman at one moment, "is the freedom to desire nothing beyond what you already have." When the sun rose, Goku understood something fundamental. In that ceremony that would happen in just a few hours, he was about to become the most imprisoned person in the kingdom. Thousands of people would work for him. Millions of gold coins would flow into his coffers. Entire lands would be under his control. And all of that would be an invisible chain that would imprison him for the rest of his life. The fisherman never knew that the young man he had conversed with was the son of the great lord. He continued fishing in the river, indifferent to what happened in the courts of nobles. He had already said everything that needed to be said. Goku returned to the palace when morning was well advanced. His father waited for him, impatient for the ceremony. Thousands of people were arriving. The Empress herself had confirmed her presence. It was the most important day of Goku's life. At that moment, the son looked into his father's eyes and said something that would echo forever in the chronicles of the kingdom. "I refuse the inheritance. I will become a monk." The silence that followed was deafening. His father turned white. Advisors screamed. People in the palace began to whisper. Refuse the greatest inheritance in the kingdom. That was madness, insanity, even betrayal. But Goku had already made his decision. That night, he left the palace. He left the gold. He left the power. He left everything. And in that act of letting go, he finally understood something the fisherman had tried to teach him on the river's edge. True wealth is not what you accumulate, it's what you can let go of. Before you continue, I need you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to join a community that questions the dominant narratives about money and success. Second, like this video if you're beginning to see that freedom and wealth might be on opposite sides of the same coin. Third, comment your honest answer to this question. Have you ever refused something you wanted because you knew it would imprison you? Share your truth. Chapter 2: The Monastery Years. The monastery on Mount Koya became Goku's home, not as punishment but as sanctuary. The monks didn't know he was a noble. They didn't know he had refused the greatest inheritance in the kingdom. To them, he was simply another seeker, another soul fleeing the tyranny of the world. The first days were brutal. Goku's body, accustomed to silk and comfort, rebelled against the stone floor, the cold water, the simple rice meals. His hands, which had never worked, began to bleed from labor. His mind, which had been trained to command, had to learn to obey. Every instinct screamed at him to return to the palace, to claim what was rightfully his. But Goku didn't return. Something in those first conversations with the fisherman had awakened in him a curiosity deeper than any desire for comfort. He wanted to understand what the fisherman understood, that secret peace, that freedom from wanting. The head monk, Master Daichi, observed Goku carefully during those first weeks. He saw a young man carrying invisible chains. The monk didn't ask questions. He simply gave Goku tasks: sweep the courtyard, carry water from the well, tend the gardens, chop wood for the fire. Months passed. Goku stopped counting them. His hands became calloused. His body grew strong from labor. His mind became quieter. And something unexpected happened. The work that had seemed like punishment transformed into meditation. When he swept the courtyard, there was no thought of Goku the nobleman, Goku the heir, Goku the important person. There was only the broom, the stone, the movement. One evening, after 2 years at the monastery, Master Daichi called Goku to his quarters. The old monk was sitting in meditation, and he gestured for Goku to sit across from him. "Why did you come here?" asked Daichi. Goku paused. The question seemed simple, but he understood its depth. "Because I wanted to understand something," he answered slowly. "I wanted to know what it means to be free." Daichi nodded. "And have you found your answer?" Goku considered this. "I'm beginning to understand that freedom isn't something you find. It's something you release. I spent the first 20 years of my life grasping for security, for status, for significance. Every grasp made me heavier." The monk smiled. "Most people never understand this. They die still grasping, still convinced that the next acquisition, the next achievement, the next accumulation will finally bring them peace. But peace was always available to them. They just refused to stop grabbing long enough to feel it." Daichi paused, studying Goku intently. "I know who you are. I have always known. The former Lord's son, the one who refused the throne. Do you know why I didn't tell you?" Goku's eyes widened. "How long have you known?" "Since the first day. A messenger came from the palace, asking if we had a young man matching your description. He said the new lord was searching for his brother." Daichi stood and walked to the window. "I told the messenger we had no such person, because in a way, that was true. The Goku who arrived here 2 years ago was already dead. The one who might have become Lord died in the refusal itself." Goku felt something shift inside him. "So this has all been a test?" "No," said Daichi gently. "It's been a transformation. You came here seeking freedom through renunciation, but true freedom isn't about renouncing things. That's still grasping, just in the opposite direction. True freedom is about understanding that nothing ever belonged to you in the first place. The gold, the land, the power, none of it was ever yours to possess. You were always just borrowing it temporarily." The monk explained further. "This is what most people never understand about wealth. They believe they own their money, their possessions, their status. But ownership is an illusion. Everything you accumulate is accumulating you in return. Every possession becomes a responsibility. Every achievement becomes a debt you owe to your ego. Goku listened intently as Daichi described the psychological mechanism that kept people imprisoned. When a man believes his value comes from what he owns, he becomes a slave to protection. He sleeps poorly. He makes decisions from fear. He surrounds himself with walls. His relationships become transactions. His work becomes obsession. His entire existence becomes a desperate attempt to prevent loss. But the fisherman, said Goku, he had nothing, and he was free. Exactly, said Daichi. The fisherman understood something that the richest men in the kingdom never grasp. You cannot be robbed of what you don't possess. You cannot lose what you never claimed as yours. The fisherman could die tomorrow and feel he had lived fully. The nobleman dying in his palace surrounded by treasures dies in terror, desperately grasping at a life he never truly lived. Over the following years, Goku's understanding deepened. He wasn't just living in a monastery. He was being systematically deconstructed and rebuilt. Every meditation revealed another layer of attachment. Every day of labor revealed another form of grasping. Every conversation with Master Daichi revealed another way his mind had been colonized by the culture of accumulation. One day, 5 years after arriving at the monastery, a messenger came from the capital. Goku's father had died. His brother, the new lord, wanted Goku to return. He would be restored to his position. Everything was prepared. Goku could reclaim his place in the world. Goku read the message and felt nothing. No desire, no regret, no sense of loss. He simply handed the message back to the messenger and returned to sweeping the courtyard. The messenger was confused. Don't you understand? You could have everything. Your brother is offering you wealth, position, power. Goku smiled. I did have everything, and I discovered that everything was nothing. Now I have nothing, and I've discovered that nothing is everything. Master Daichi watched from a distance as Goku continued his work. The transformation was complete. The young man who had arrived seeking freedom through escape had become someone who understood that freedom was the ability to be completely present with whatever arose, without needing to grasp it or push it away. You're ready, Daichi told Goku that evening. Not to return to the world, but to teach in it. You will leave this monastery. Goku looked surprised. But I have found peace here. Precisely, said the old monk. This is why you must go. True understanding cannot be hoarded in monasteries. It must flow into the world like water, like wind, like light. There are people suffering from the same disease you are suffering from. They are drowning in possessions. They are imprisoned by wealth. They are dying of fear that they might lose what they never truly owned. Daichi placed a hand on Goku's shoulder. Your refusal to claim the inheritance was powerful, but your teaching in the world will be even more powerful. Go. Show others what you have learned. Show them that the greatest wealth is the freedom to want nothing. Chapter 3, Teaching. Goku left the monastery with nothing but robes and a walking staff. Master Daichi had given him no instructions, no map, no destination. Go where people need you, the old monk had simply said. Your presence will be a mirror. Those ready to see will see. For years, Goku wandered through the provinces of Japan. He didn't establish a temple or gather followers. He simply appeared where he was needed, taught when asked, and disappeared when his work was done. He became known as the monk who refuses everything, a figure of both curiosity and confusion in a society obsessed with accumulation. One day, Goku arrived at the gates of a wealthy merchant's estate. The merchant, named Tanaka, had heard of this strange monk and invited him to speak. Tanaka was one of the richest men in the region, yet he was dying, not from illness, but from anxiety. He had accumulated more wealth than 50 lifetimes could spend, yet he couldn't sleep at night. He was convinced that everything could be taken from him at any moment. Master Goku, Tanaka said, his hands trembling, I have everything a man could desire, gold, land, influence, yet I feel I have nothing. I am constantly afraid. How do I find peace? Goku looked at the merchant with compassion. He had seen this pattern countless times. Show me your greatest treasure, he said. Tanaka led Goku through his mansion, displaying room after room of accumulated wealth, gold statues, precious scrolls, fine silks, rare artifacts from across the world. With each treasure Tanaka showed him, Goku asked the same question. If this burned tomorrow, would you still be you? Tanaka couldn't answer. Every treasure he showed, he became more anxious thinking about its potential loss. Finally, they arrived at Tanaka's treasury, mountains of gold coins stacked higher than a man. Tanaka stood before his fortune, and for the first time, he wept. "This is killing me," he whispered. "I know it is, I can feel it, but I can't let it go. If I don't have this, what am I?" Goku sat in silence for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would change Tanaka's life. "You are afraid because you have confused your value with your inventory. You believe that without these possessions, you are nothing, so you must protect them with your entire being. Your anxiety is not a flaw. It is actually your system working perfectly. You have built your identity on sand, so of course you are terrified of the wind." "Then what should I do?" asked Tanaka desperately. "Give everything away?" "No," said Goku. "That would still be grasping, just in the opposite direction. Instead, I want you to experiment with something. Keep all your wealth, but change your relationship to it. Understand that you are not the owner of this gold. You are its temporary custodian. One day, you will die, and all of this will pass to someone else. Knowing this, can you still care for it well?" Tanaka didn't understand. "How can I care for something if I don't own it?" "A mother cares for her child, yet she does not own the child," explained Goku. "A gardener tends the flowers, yet he does not own them. Ownership creates anxiety. Stewardship creates peace. The moment you release the illusion that this gold is yours, the moment you recognize that you are merely borrowing it temporarily from the universe, your fear will dissolve." Over the following months, Goku stayed at Tanaka's estate. He taught the merchant and his family a radical practice. Every day, Tanaka would walk through his treasury and practice this phrase: "This belongs to no one. I am merely its keeper for this moment." At first it felt like a lie, but gradually something shifted. Tanaka noticed his sleep improving. His anxiety began to dissolve. He started making decisions from wisdom instead of fear. He began to give generously to his community, not from guilt, but from the understanding that keeping wealth isolated only multiplied his anxiety. Within a year, Tanaka had given away half his fortune to build schools, temples, and support networks for the poor. But he had not become poor himself. He had simply released the grip of ownership that was suffocating him. One day, Tanaka asked Goku, "Master, why do you not teach this to everyone? Why do you not establish a school? You could help so many more people." Goku smiled. "Because the moment I establish a school, I become invested in it. The moment I gather followers, I must maintain them. The moment I accumulate students, I become imprisoned by their expectations. I would trade my freedom for relevance. That is not wisdom. That is the same trap, wearing a different mask." "But then your teaching dies with you," protested Tanaka. "No," said Goku. "True teaching doesn't die, it flows. The fisherman who taught me never established a school. He was simply being himself, fully present, fully free. His teaching entered me because I was desperate enough to listen. Now through you it flows to others. Through the schools you build, through the generosity you practice, through the peace you model, my teaching flows into the world. But it doesn't belong to me. It never did." Tanaka understood. The merchant had become the student of a different kind of wealth. He had discovered that the more he released the need to possess and control, the more abundance flowed through his life naturally. Not because he had magically attracted it through positive thinking, but because he was no longer wasting all his energy on protection and defense. Years passed. Goku continued his wandering. He encountered nobles, merchants, monks, soldiers. Each person was drowning in a different way. Some were drowning in greed, some in status anxiety, some in the fear of losing what they had accumulated, some in the shame of not having accumulated enough. But the teaching was always the same. Your suffering comes not from what you have, but from your belief that you must have it to be valuable. Release that belief, and you release your suffering. One evening, Goku sat by a river, the same river where he had met the fisherman decades earlier. An old man was fishing there. At first Goku didn't recognize him, but as he watched he saw it was the same fisherman, older now, but still carrying that same quality of peace. Goku approached and sat beside him without speaking. They fished together in silence as the sun set, the moon rose and the stars emerged. Finally, the fisherman turned to Goku and smiled. "You became what I taught you to be," he said, "but you never knew it was teaching. That is the greatest teaching of all. The one that happens without effort, without intention, without someone grasping at relevance." "I never knew you recognized me that night," said Goku. The fisherman laughed. "I knew, but you needed to believe I didn't. Because the moment you felt recognized, you would have turned it into something. You would have made it important, and importance is just another form of imprisonment." They sat together until dawn, two men who had nothing and therefore possessed everything. And in that silence, the deepest teaching occurred. The teaching that cannot be spoken, that cannot be accumulated, that cannot be possessed, and therefore cannot be lost. Before you continue to the final chapter, I need you to do something. In the comments below, write one word, just one, the word that represents what you need to let go of to be truly free. It could be money, status, control, fear, or anything else. Write it, make it public. Because the moment you name it, you begin to release it. This is not just a comment. This is the first step of your own transformation. Chapter 4, The Return to Zero. Decades passed. Goku aged gracefully, not because he fought aging, but because he accepted it. His hair turned white, his skin wrinkled, his body moved slower. But his eyes remained bright, untouched by the anxiety that gripped men half his age. By now, stories of Goku had spread throughout Japan. They had become almost legendary. The monk who refused a kingdom, the teacher who refused a school, the sage who possessed nothing and therefore needed to fear nothing. Some people tried to track him down, hoping to learn from him directly. But Goku had no fixed location. He appeared where he was needed and disappeared when his work was done. One final day, at an age when most men had long since surrendered to comfort and safety, Goku returned to the monastery on Mount Koya. Master Daichi had died many years before, but the monastery still stood, still functioning, still transforming seekers, just as it had transformed Goku. The current head monk, a student of Daichi, recognized Goku immediately despite the decades that had passed. They sat together in the meditation hall where so much of Goku's transformation had occurred. "You have come to die," said the young monk. It was not a question. "I have come to complete the circle," replied Goku. "I arrived here as a man running from something. I am returning as a man who has finally caught up with himself." That night, in the presence of the monastery community, Goku spoke for the first time about the deeper philosophical truth that had guided his entire life. Monks and visitors gathered to hear his words. "Most people believe they are imprisoned by circumstances," he began. "They say, if only I had more money, I would be free. If only I had more time, I would be happy. If only I had more success, I would feel worthy. But this is backwards. Circumstances do not create imprisonment. Your relationship to circumstances creates imprisonment." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The fisherman and I were in the same world, the same economic system, the same feudal hierarchy, the same human condition, but he was free and I was imprisoned. Not because of our external circumstances, but because of our internal relationship to those circumstances. He had released the need to possess, and therefore possessed freedom. I was addicted to possession, and therefore was possessed by it." Goku explained the psychological mechanism that keeps most people trapped in cycles of accumulation and anxiety. Your mind is designed by evolution to seek security. In the ancient world, accumulation meant survival. The tribe that gathered the most food survived the winter. The man who acquired the most resources could protect his family. This instinct served us well for thousands of years. But in the modern world, this same instinct has become your prison. He continued, "In contemporary times, you have created a system where accumulation is infinite. There is always more money to earn, more status to achieve, more things to buy. Your ancient survival instinct, which evolved for a finite world, is now running on an infinite treadmill. You can never accumulate enough because the system is designed so that enough doesn't exist. A young monk raised his hand. Master Goku, are you saying we should have nothing? That we should reject all security? Goku shook his head. This is the most common misunderstanding. I am not saying you should be reckless or irresponsible. The fisherman worked his entire life. He earned his rice, his boat, his shelter. He was not lazy or passive. What he had released was the anxiety that came from grasping. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the monastery gardens. Here is the distinction that changes everything. There is a difference between having and grasping. There is a difference between working and obsessing. There is a difference between responsibility and fear. Goku explained the 3 levels of relationship to possession. The first level is desperation. This is where most people begin. You believe you need things for survival and worth. You grasp desperately. Every acquisition brings temporary relief, followed by deeper anxiety. This is the merchant Tanaka before our meeting. This is most of humanity. The second level is discipline. This is where those who have read books and attended seminars believe they are. You think you can control your grasping through willpower and systems. You create budgets, investment plans, productivity frameworks, but you are still operating from the fundamental belief that you need to accumulate to be safe. You are just more organized about your desperation. The third level is wisdom. This is where I've arrived after decades of practice. You understand that accumulation and loss are both inevitable and temporary. You work because work is the expression of your being. You have things because having things is the natural result of living. But your identity is not dependent on what you have. Your worth is not measured by your acquisitions. You are free. A merchant in the audience asked the question everyone wanted answered. But Master Goku, in the modern world we need money. We need security. How can we apply this wisdom when we must work within the system to survive? Goku smiled. This is the paradox that most people cannot hold. Yes, you need money. Yes, you need security. I am not telling you to reject these things. I am telling you to release your addiction to them. Work skillfully within the system. Earn what you need. Create security for your family. But understand that the system itself is insane. It tells you that your value comes from your earnings. It tells you that happiness comes from consumption. It tells you that security comes from endless accumulation. He sat back down, his ancient eyes fixed on each person in the room. Here is how to apply this in modern times. First, understand the mechanism. Your anxiety about money is not really about money. It is about your belief that you are only as valuable as what you produce. Begin to separate your worth from your productivity. You are valuable simply because you exist. This is not a motivational phrase. This is a fact of existence. Second, create what I call dignity through detachment. This means you earn money, but you don't worship it. You create security, but you don't obsess over it. You work hard, but you're not attached to being successful. You do your best, but you don't need to be the best. This paradoxically makes you better at everything because you're not performing from fear. Third, practice regular renunciation. Not dramatic renunciation like I did, but small daily practices of letting go. 1 day a week, spend money on nothing. 1 day a month, give away something valuable. 1 day a year, do a complete audit of what you own and release what no longer serves you. These practices remind your nervous system that loss is not a catastrophe. Fourth, develop what you might call financial consciousness. Know how much money you truly need for security and dignity. Then, anything beyond that is optional. Most people never do this calculation. They just keep accumulating beyond their actual needs, driven by comparison, status anxiety, and the infinite treadmill of the market. But when you know your actual number, you can rest. Fifth, redirect your accumulation energy toward experiences, relationships, and wisdom instead of things. A beautiful meal shared with friends feeds you more than a gold statue in your home. A deep conversation with someone you love teaches you more than a rare book you never read. A moment of genuine rest is worth more than 100 hours of work spent acquiring things you don't need. Goku paused, and the silence in the room was profound. Let me tell you what I discovered in my decades of teaching. The people who were happiest were never the richest. They were the ones who had somehow managed to release the need to prove their worth through accumulation. Some of them had little money, some had much, but the amount didn't matter. What mattered was their relationship to it. He told the story of a nobleman he had met years before, a man with vast wealth and terrible anxiety. After years of teaching, the nobleman had not reduced his wealth, but he had changed his relationship to it. He became a steward instead of an owner. He gave generously, not from guilt, but from understanding that money was simply energy flowing through his hands. He worked but was not obsessed with work. He succeeded but was not dependent on success. And finally, for the first time in his life, he could sleep peacefully. "This is what I offer you," said Goku, looking at each person. Not poverty, not rejection of the world, but freedom from the internal tyranny that keeps you imprisoned even when you have everything externally. The prison is not the money. The prison is your belief that the money defines you. As dawn broke over Mount Koya, Goku asked the final question. What would change in your life if you truly believed that you are valuable simply because you exist? Not because of what you produce, not because of what you own, not because of what you achieve, but simply because you are alive. No one answered with words, but something shifted in the room. A young person began to weep quietly. An older businessman stared out the window, seeing perhaps for the first time that he could choose a different relationship to his wealth. A woman who had spent decades chasing security felt her shoulders drop as something released. This is the truth that systems of accumulation never want you to discover. Your freedom doesn't cost anything. It requires no purchase, no subscription, no upgrade. It costs only the release of what you mistakenly believe you need to prove you're valuable. In the following weeks, Goku remained at the monastery. He taught, he meditated, he walked in the gardens, and he waited peacefully for his life to end, knowing that when it did, he would leave nothing behind but freedom. Not because he had rejected the world, but because he had truly understood it. The last students who sat with him asked what he wanted them to remember most. Goku smiled. Remember the fisherman. Remember that he never became famous. He never accumulated followers. He never built an institution. He simply lived fully, present to each moment, attached to nothing. And in that simplicity, he became more influential than any emperor. His teaching flowed through me and through you and through everyone we touch. Not because it was grand or important, but because it was true. And truth, unlike money, cannot be lost. It can only be given away infinitely. When Goku passed, the monastery arranged no grand funeral. There was no massive gathering of notable people. Instead, the monks simply released his ashes into the river that flowed past Mount Koya, the same river where the fisherman had taught him decades before, the same river that had taught him that all things flow, that nothing is held, that freedom is always available to those willing to stop grasping and simply flow with what is. But his words remained, not preserved in books or schools or institutions, but flowing through the hearts of everyone who had heard him speak. Flowing through the merchant who learned to be a steward of wealth instead of a slave to it. Flowing through the young people who realized they could choose a different relationship to money and success. Flowing through you, reading these words, beginning perhaps for the first time to question whether your accumulation is serving you or imprisoning you. This is the greatest teaching Goku left behind. The moment you stop trying to be someone through possession, you become free to simply be. And in simply being, you discover that you were always enough. The wealth you were always seeking was never external. It was always the freedom to exist without constantly needing to prove you deserve to exist.